Welcome to this video about using local produce for healthy dips and condiments. Today we will share several recipes and actually prepare a couple as well and talk about ways that you can enjoy these dishes now and even save some for later when the produce is no longer in season. There are a lot of vegetables and fruits in season right now. Some of them are just starting their harvest, others are coming to the end. So it's a great time to have a variety of options to just work with and add to your freezer or to your fridge, or just to eat now if you're still having picnics and barbecues and trying to enjoy grilled food and other things in the early fall as the weather is still nice. Today we won't be able to cover all of these vegetables, but you can keep in mind that if you have other things, there are plenty of recipes out there in cookbooks available through the library and on websites. And most things will freeze in freezer-safe containers and store for several months, up to maybe 6 months, if you would like to keep these kinds of things around through the winter season. One of the great things about dips and condiments is that they are something you can use right now, but you might also use them again later because we might not eat a lot of something. We can keep it in the fridge and freeze part of it and know that we can continue to use it. And the recipes we are talking about here are really healthy ones. We're not going to do anything with a sour cream base or even a Greek yogurt base, although Greek yogurt is a nice healthy substitute, or even a vegan plant-based sour cream or plant-based yogurt for those sour cream dips and other condiments. Certainly you could do those kinds of substitutions as well. But today we're going to talk about using the fruits and the vegetables that we can get locally right now from our gardens and from the farmer's market to be the base of many of these dips and condiments, or if not the base, then the base itself is something pretty healthy like beans. Today we are going to make 2 dishes, and we will be pausing our recording from time to time because you don't need to wait for something to start to simmer while I have to do that. Instead, I will pause this video recording in between and I will show you what I'm doing and explain things. You are welcome to return to this video at different times to work through these recipes on separate occasions. If you have the ingredients for both of these recipes right now, you could work straight through, or you can just record through screenshots and other means the recipes that I'm offering here and just make them later on your own. If you're going to make these dishes, we will talk a little bit about what you'll need to do to prep. If you're going to make the ajvar, which is a Serbian eggplant dip that has paprika as its primary seasoning, so it doesn't have to be super hot. We can talk about ways to spice it up if you like spicier foods, but you can also just use sweet paprika, and this isn't a very spicy dish. And it's a nice way to enjoy roasted eggplant. So if you are going to make this dish, what I recommend that you do is pause this video and take care of prepping the eggplant and the pepper and the garlic by washing them. The eggplant and the pepper you'll want to wash. You'll also want to cut the eggplant into thick slices. And the garlic you can leave in the skins, and preheat your oven to 350 because these will need to roast for about 30 to 45 minutes. It depends on how big your eggplant is. I can show you the eggplant I used. It was a small eggplant, so it only took about 30 minutes to get soft. And peppers don't take that long, and neither does garlic. So it really depends. If you have a very large eggplant to use, then you'll want to consider allowing 45 minutes for this to roast. And I would recommend that before you start up with us on the recipe, that the eggplant be out of the oven and cooling, because ours has already cooled, in fact. I'm going to show it to you now in sliced form. So this is the eggplant. As you can see, I cut it into nice thick chunks. This is a smallish eggplant. A medium is usually about a pound. This weighed in a little less than a pound. It's around 12 ounces. So I am going to use a little bit less in this recipe, and I will explain that later. But if you have a medium or larger eggplant that's a pound or more, you'll get a bit more out of it, but this is what it should look like when you slice it to roast. And actually, it's already been roasted. The only thing I haven't done now is to peel the skin off of it. So that's what you'll want to do to be ready to work on the ivar if you're going to make that with us today. For frijoles, if you want to make this bean dip that includes bell pepper and potentially corn as well, if you have some and would like to use it, then what I recommend that you do is first make sure you have all of these ingredients. And the only thing you really need to do to prep this is to make sure you have an ear of corn that's been cooked. You can probably see from the picture here that I've roasted my corn, but you could also boil it. It depends on what flavor you would prefer or how you prefer to prep your corn. I like roasted corn, so I'll often use that. And sometimes if I make a salsa with the corn, I'll even use roasted tomatoes. So go ahead, if you're going to make that. We will do this second. This will be the second dish. You can just get the corn boiling, and that won't take as long, obviously, as roasting the corn or the eggplant will take. If you're going to roast the corn, you probably need 30 to 35 minutes for that as well. So we are going to make that ivar, but I also have one other dish that is a really great dip or side with eggplant. I'll confess that eggplant is not my favorite produce. It gets very soft, and I like my fruits and veggies to be crunchy most of the time. There's a satisfaction to that. But eggplant is good for people who don't have as much chewing capacity. It also, because it gets so soft, is really great for dips. So if you can find dip recipes that have nice flavors to them, then eggplant is a nice healthy way to make a dip that can help you to avoid those unwanted saturated fat calories that are in sour cream based or even Greek yogurt based dips, or mayonnaise for that matter. This recipe, an Indian style roasted eggplant, is really one of my favorite recipes. I had it in a restaurant one time in Philly, and I just fell in love with it. I had to start searching for recipes so that I could give it a try. And there are a lot of recipes out there. You could find others if you'd like, depending on your own preferences for styles, because there are a number of different variations around India. But this is one that's fairly easy, and it also isn't super spicy for people who are maybe a little wary of certain kinds of curries, or even for people who haven't tried curry in the past. So this is a nice recipe to try. If you don't like heat in your dishes, you can just omit the chili pepper. And if you don't have garam masala or are a little wary of it, you could substitute chili powder. They are similar spice blends. Garam masala has slightly different variation of spice ingredients in it, but they are also, there's a lot of overlap between the two spice blends. So if you've got a nice dark colored chili powder, that would be a great substitution if you don't have or don't want to try garam masala. You could also mix a half and half if you want to. A lot of Indian dishes call for both, so there would be nothing wrong with that too. And this is fairly easy. It requires a little bit more prep work in the way of getting the eggplant and everything together compared to the ivar that we're going to make, because you actually cook all of this on the stovetop even once the eggplant has been roasted. But it's still a fairly easy, straightforward dish that I recommend. You can eat it as a dish with other curries. I have done that when I'm trying to be healthy, but it's meant to be a dip. You can eat it with bread like naan or roti, or you could use pita or other soft bread. You could use chips or crackers, or just use vegetables if you're trying to be super healthy and dip other vegetables in this vegetable dip. It's worth a try if you like to experiment, or if you do like Indian dishes or are willing to just give them a try. I highly recommend it. So now we are going to make this Serbian eggplant dip. And as I said, I have everything ready to go. So I will demonstrate some things, and I will pause my recording from time to time to show you things or to wait for something to be ready to go. But basically, I have already roasted the eggplant and the pepper and the garlic, and I have chopped up the garlic and the bell pepper. And in this case, because I had a very large red bell pepper and a fairly small eggplant, I just used one red bell pepper in this case. If it had been a small pepper, I probably would have gone ahead and done two because I really like peppers. But I've used one large bell pepper and then a medium eggplant. And red is the traditional color of peppers. It doesn't have to be bell. It could be Italian, sweet Italian red pepper. Or if you don't have a red pepper, an orange or yellow one would work as well. So I have all of that ready to go. And basically at this point, I just need to remove the skins from the eggplant, and then I can process everything and show you what it looks like. Here is what the eggplant looks like now, peeled and chopped up, and I actually went ahead and mixed it in a bowl with the peppers and the garlic, the spices, and the lemon juice. I should probably also mention that eggplant is kind of tough to peel even once you've roasted it. So if it's causing issues, I don't use a vegetable peeler for eggplant because I'm afraid of losing too much of the juice. And unless you have a really sharp vegetable peeler that is going to get it right off, if it's a little bit dull, that can be an issue. So I like to use my knives because I can sharpen my knives. I usually just use a paring knife to get it off with a straight edge, and I just stick the knife right inside the skin and pull it out, and then I try to pull it with my hands as much as possible, and it'll usually pull off in strips, and I'll have to do that several times as I go around one large slice of the eggplant. So that's a tip for peeling the eggplant if you've never done that before. And here is what the dip looks like when it's been processed. As you can see, I've left it a little bit chunky. You can see chunks of the pepper because I like it that way, but you can always process it until it's completely smooth as well if you'd prefer. Do whatever you would like. Just stop the processing whenever it's reached the chunkiness that you would like. I should also mention that if you've never peeled peppers before, the skins for those usually come off fairly easily once you've roasted the pepper a nice long time. So 30 to 45 minutes in the oven should be plenty to help that skin come off really easily for you. But you could leave the skin on. It's traditional to take it off, but the skin is obviously edible. Unlike with eggplant, it's a really tough skin. But the bell pepper, especially if you like to leave it chunky like I do, you wouldn't even need to worry about peeling the skin off if you don't want to. So this is a nice recipe if you want something that's a little bit flavorful, but maybe not overly spicy because there aren't a lot of spices in this. It's mostly about the paprika. And you can use a sweet paprika if you like, a smoked paprika if you want to have that smoky mesquite flavor, or you could use a hot paprika or some combination. What I've done for this recipe today is I've done half sweet paprika, half hot paprika, and then I did use the red pepper flakes and the cayenne because I do like some heat in my dishes. So that's worth a try if you're looking for something different to do with eggplant. This is really a dip to serve with something like bread, a flat bread of some kind, or you can eat it alongside meats. They sometimes do that as well. You could serve it with chips or crackers, or even with fresh veggies again, if you're trying to be super healthy. So that's eggplant. We are not going to make any dishes with cauliflower today, but we're going to share a couple of recipes that might be helpful if you're looking for something to do with cauliflower, either to save it for later or to convince people in your family that cauliflower is worth eating. we can do things like pickling it and roasting it. You can obviously also eat it raw with some of these dips, but if you don't like to eat raw cauliflower, or if it gives you indigestion, we've got a couple of recipes here that will allow you to enjoy the cauliflower too. This is a pickled veggie recipe. There are a lot of those recipes around. There are entire cookbooks on pickling, including recipes that are considered what this is, a quick pickling recipe, where you don't actually can the recipe. You don't sterilize the jar and then put the lid on to vacuum seal it and store it at room temperature for extended periods. This is something that will go straight into the fridge once it's cooled down, and it will last probably 6 to 8 weeks in the fridge. You could probably freeze it too. Just make sure that you have about an inch at the top of whatever container you're using so that it doesn't freeze out and beyond the container itself. And you can do variations on this. You can use dill or bay leaves. You could substitute different kinds of seeds, like coriander seeds, if you like. There are a lot of different things you can do. And try other recipes. This is an example, but you can do other things with it. Anything that you would consider to be a bite-sized kind of vegetable, bites of cauliflower or carrot or small peppers like snack peppers or small not so hot chilies, anything that you would just pick up and eat, either put on a sandwich or a salad or alongside different things, is perfectly acceptable to put in these kinds of pickling recipes. So that's something you can do with cauliflower. Another thought that is not necessarily really a condiment, but it is something that would be a great side if you're trying to do healthier things, and you might gravitate toward barbecue potato chips, for example. Cauliflower is a healthier, crunchy thing that you can eat, and you can make it barbecue flavored. Obviously, this is a roasted recipe, so it's not necessarily something you serve cold. You probably want to serve it warm or at room temperature, but it could be served as a side alongside other things at a barbecue or picnic, or you can have it as a side dish with sandwiches, or you can just eat it as a snack alongside other things and have that instead of barbecue chips. It's a really great recipe. If you don't have a barbecue rub, then you can just mix. What I did was a tablespoon of chili powder, a tablespoon of paprika, sweet, smoked, or hot, and then a tablespoon of brown sugar. And it's basically equal parts oil, lemon juice, and a barbecue rub. And you cook the cauliflower for about 5 minutes on the stove top to get all of that stuff mixed together well, and it'll start to soak up the barbecue rub with the oil and lemon juice, and then you put it into the oven and roast it for about 20-30 minutes. Right now, if you're getting local cauliflower, the head that I used was really, really nice. It wasn't green at all. It only took about 25 minutes for it to roast once I had done it on the stove top. So that's something, if you're trying to find an alternative to barbecue chips, it's a great healthy substitution. The last portion of this video is about peppers and tomatoes, and we will make frijoles, which have both, and we'll share several other recipes that you might do with local peppers and tomatoes, as well as other produce that's available in season now. We are not going to make hummus, but one thing you can do, you can make your own hummus, obviously. We're not going to give you a recipe here. There are plenty of recipes around. Honestly, most of the time, I just buy a tub of hummus at the grocery store, and either plain or with garlic in it, and then I will go ahead and throw things in it to make it flavorful. I'll roast a bell pepper and chop it up. You can peel it if you want, but you don't have to before you chop it and put it in the hummus. You can add chili peppers if you like things spicy. If there's no garlic in it and you want to add some, you could add garlic. You could even roast that as well, along with the bell pepper. Whatever you want to do, you can add all kinds of things to hummus. Give it a try. You can add some chopped parsley or some chives, all kinds of things you can do, and it's a healthy dip compared to something made from sour cream or even Greek yogurt, because there's fiber in it and other nutrients, and it's much lower in fats. Another thing we're not going to make, but that would pair very nicely with the Indian style roasted eggplant, or even just be an additional condiment with a barbecue, or when you've got a lot of things to dip, is to make a fresh tomato chutney. This is great if you have peppers and tomatoes in your own garden. You can just go ahead and chop all of those things up and mix them with all of the seasonings here and ingredients and put them in a food processor or blender. It should have a consistency similar to salsa. So depending on how chunky you like, you can leave it fairly chunky, or you can run it till it's fairly smooth. Just don't let it liquefy, because once you lose all of the substance to the tomatoes, it will just become more like a liquid. Leave a little bit of chunk to the tomatoes. But this is a nice, flavorful dish. It's not super spicy, even though this is really an Indian style dish. You can leave the chilies out and it won't be super hot. And then it's basically got chili powder and the flavor of the fresh vegetables. So it's a really nice dish to pair with a lot of things, to put on sandwiches, to put on salads, to have as a side with dips and other dips and chip and vegetables and things like that. It's worth trying. Another thing you can do is, if you make salsa, you could buy jarred salsa and do this as well. Buy jarred salsa and just roast or boil an ear of corn and add it in, because right now the corn is really nice and it adds some fiber to a salsa. Also bulks it up if you're trying to make it go a bit further for a party. But I also have a nice salsa recipe here that's pretty easy to make. I usually do it with a can of diced tomatoes, usually roasted tomatoes. But this time of year, if you've got nice tomatoes from your garden or the farmer's market, I would recommend that you roast those and peel them. And you'll want about 2 cups then of chopped tomato, and basically just mix it all with all the other ingredients. And you can run it through a food processor if you want to get it to the consistency you like, if you like it to be fairly smooth, or you can leave it nice and chunky, whatever you like. This makes a nice condiment or side dish, or just, again, something to dip your chips and your veggies in. What we are going to make now is the frijole dip. So if you're going to make this, hopefully you have an ear of corn ready to go. I've actually already removed my corn from the cob so that I'm ready to actually start cooking this on the stovetop. So you might again want to pause this video. I am going to pause the recording because I'm going to get the stove heated up and get the oil heated and start to saute some of these things. So if you want to go ahead and get started on that, you just want to heat up the oil if you've got all of the ingredients ready to go, or go ahead and gather those ingredients, and we will talk about what this dip should look like when it's done and what are some things that you can do with it. I just wanted to show you here that I am not using a sweet bell pepper for this recipe. This isn't a green bell pepper either. This is actually a poblano pepper. It's not really a sweet pepper. It's actually considered a hot pepper, though it's one of the mildest of all of the hot peppers. So I'm going to use that instead of a red or green or yellow or orange bell pepper, along with a habanero in this case, because I like spicy hot dishes. I have completed step 1 in the directions, so everything is cooking on the stovetop in a pot now, except for the corn and the spices and the cilantro. So I will say a couple of things while everything is cooking. One is that you can, again, use fresh tomatoes from your garden if you'd like. You might want to peel them. If you're using canned tomatoes, they've already been peeled, but you might peel them. I'm using a can of tomatoes instead of using whole tomatoes because I don't have a garden, so I don't have any tomatoes that are really great for using for this. The other thing I can say is that, as I note in the ingredients, I like to use an entire 14-ounce can, which is more like 2 cups of tomatoes, because I like a lot of tomatoes in my spicy dishes. They really do a nice job of absorbing the flavor of things like chili powder. So you could go ahead and use a whole can, or use 2 cups if you'd like, or something in between if you are chopping up your own tomatoes. You'll still get a fairly thick dip. It's not going to be quite the consistency of a tomato chutney or a tomato salsa, because the beans are going to thicken it up nicely. So you could go ahead and use as much tomato as you'd like. This is what it looks like if it's been cooking in the pot before you mash the beans, and the tomatoes are relatively chunky. And that's basically 2 cups or a 14-ounce can of tomatoes. So you can see that it's still a pretty thick mixture, and it's going to stay fairly chunky since we're really only going to mash up the beans, and the tomatoes will get mashed up a bit with them. So I have mashed up the beans now, and the tomatoes have gotten mashed a little bit as well. There's a bit more liquid to it at this point, but it's still a fairly thick mixture, and once we add the corn, that'll thicken it up again a bit. And here's what it looks like with the rest of the ingredients added. You can see it's a fairly thick mixture, so it'll be good for dipping once it cools a bit. And it will also be good to go in quesadillas, burritos, tacos, those kinds of things as a healthy filling. So that's the frijole dip. It can be served on its own as an actual dip, or it can be used as a healthy filling. If you want to eat this instead of a meat as a filling in different kinds of taco and tortilla shell items, or if you have somebody who wants to reduce their meat a little bit, you could mix a little meat along with some frijole, or just eat it on the side like a condiment, like salsa or guacamole. So there are a lot more things you can do. You can make combinations. Here are a couple of possible suggestions. You might mix together the tomato chutney and the Indian style roasted eggplant and serve them both with naan, roti, or pita flatbread. And you could have some fresh veggies as well. If you want to make a Tex-Mex buffet, you can use the frijoles and make the corn salsa, or just make the salsa without corn if you prefer, and serve with things like tortilla chips and tortilla shells. You could have some salad greens to go in the shells if you're doing it that way, and any other preferred condiments. But these recipes all offer some healthy options for having snacks and condiments alongside the things that we're eating at our meals, and they increase our fiber intake. They reduce our saturated fat intake because we're not eating a bunch of cheese and sour cream and things like that. The frijole dip does call for you to add some cheese at the end. I usually leave it out, and then if I decide to make a quesadilla or a burrito with it, I will put some shredded cheese right into the quesadilla or burrito when I make it. But usually when I make the frijole dip, I will even freeze some of it, and I don't necessarily want to freeze it with cheese. And if I eat it as a snack, I might just have it with a few tortilla chips and not bother with the cheese, because I'm just trying to stay a little bit healthier. There are a lot of things that you can do. You can store these things in the fridge probably for about a week or so. For most of the veggie-based dishes we've made here and talked about, if they're pickled, they'll last for probably 6 to 8 weeks. And then you can freeze any of these things in a freezer-safe container. I've frozen a lot of different things that way, and I pull it out and eat it later so that I can enjoy these fruits and veggies when they're no longer in season. I hope that there's something here that's been helpful for you, and that you're able to enjoy the veggies while they're in your garden or while you're able to get them from the farmer's market.